Just over 2 weeks ago, it was Climate Night, an event in which 8 late-night talk and/or comedy shows from the mainstream media pooled their resources to bring awareness to climate change and what to do about it. And conservative commentators from Fox News threw in their 2 cents on the subject. But if I can digress for a moment, 3.5 years ago, I started chronicling late-night talk shows right here in the Late Night Saga. Most of what I've covered so far has been from the 1970s to the 1990s. The most recent event I covered was the war between Jay Leno and Conan O'Brien, and that happened back in 2010. And of course, Conan taking George Lopez's time slot, which also happened in 2010. So I have been eagerly awaiting the opportunity for the Late Night Saga to cross paths with a current event. The closest I've come so far was an event 2 years ago, or maybe a marketing stunt, where Will Ferrell, in character as Ron Burgundy, appeared on 6 late-night talk shows, all in the same day. At the time it happened, I captured all the available clips from the shows and all the other talking heads that were talking about the event. But there wasn't really much I could add to it to make it worthy of an edition in the Late Night Saga. Probably the most interesting logistical feat was that Will Ferrell taped 3 shows in New York and then flew across the country to tape 3 more in LA on the same day. Unlike Leno versus Conan, where I skimmed through hundreds of hours of video to find the relevant 20 minutes or so that made up my late night saga, in this case there was only probably an hour's worth of clips anyways, and anybody was free to just watch them on YouTube. So I decided to save all those clips in case I do a future event about how there really aren't late night wars anymore. I might call it Peace in Our Time. But now we've got Climate Night, and this story has a bit more of a direction to it because it's not just the Climate Night, it's also Fox News doing their commentary on it. Now, I don't really want to take political sides because I'm more of a centrist, and I don't really want to talk about the science of this event because I'm not an expert. But I do think this event almost perfectly illustrates the style that the opinion hosts tend to use on the news, where they ask questions as if the question has no answer, even though it usually does. And they also do some of the straw man argument where they, instead of critiquing what their political opponent said, they critique something that they didn't say. And watching this event unfold, it was sort of like a Q&A where every point or question that the newsies brought up were answered by the comedians. Just to be clear about the clips I used in my call and response video, Greg Gutfeld earlier this year started his late night show, which he considers a talk comedy show, up against all the late night hosts, Fallon, Colbert, and Kimmel, because he runs, I think, from 11 to 12. So I would have liked to see the actual episode of Gutfeld that aired that night against Climate Night, so I could see how he counter-programmed the event. But unfortunately, all the clips that Fox News made available on their YouTube channel were not from that show. They were from either The Five, which is a 5 p.m. show, a panel show with like 5 hosts, of which Greg Gutfeld is one, and also Fox News put up clips from Tucker Carlson Tonight, which is a soapbox for Tucker Carlson's opinion, which runs in primetime, I think, at 8 p.m. I did leave out some clips in my video from the news guys talking about the comedians being corporate shills because I believe that could apply to either side. And I left out probably some of the more offensive jokes, not because I shy away from the offensive, well, I guess I do a lot of times, but not always. But because I actually wanted to focus on what I thought were sort of relevant points to the event that either side brought up. The first question raised by the Fox team was, is it even appropriate for comedians to be addressing a serious topic? Shouldn't they be doing comedy? The answer from Steve Badow, who organized the Climate Night event, was that comedians could take serious issues and make them seem less scary and more manageable. It should be noted that Steve Badow was the producer and head writer for The Daily Show with Jon Stewart, and was also the producer-showrunner of The Daily Show with Trevor Noah. So it's possible the reason why he picked late-night talk shows to cover this event is just because these are the people he knows. Although I find it kind of a strange critique for Gutfeld to make in the first place, since he is a news guy on a news channel who's doing what he calls a comedy show, and yet from what I've seen, he talks a lot about politics. The Fox News team also accuses the comedians of fear-mongering and spreading doom and gloom. Although the overall message of Climate Night seemed to be that we're going to be okay. Everything's going to be fine, as long as we all just work together. The news hosts then state that one of the problems is that these liberals in the media that bring up climate change never offer any real solutions. But then, as I showed in my call and response video, they all offered real solutions, ranging from the very general, such as start a conversation, become educated, become an activist, to the more specific like reduce water usage, reduce plastic usage, plant a tree, support green tech companies, by investing, or by using your purchasing power to support green businesses. So if the newsies had wanted to debate the effectiveness or appropriateness of any of these solutions, that would have been great, instead of just claiming that no solutions were offered. Dana Perino claimed that the solution to the problem, which I guess admits there's a problem, is supporting carbon capture and sort of new green technologies. And that's where she finds herself in agreement, I think, with most of the comedy hosts. What I found interesting in Seth Meyers' segment was that first he claims that allowing renewable energy to develop without interference will solve all of our problems. But then a few moments later, he says that government subsidies and penalties will be required to balance the playing field between the green energies and the fossil fuels. So I would have liked to see a little more in-depth explanation of what seems like a contradictory statement. Again, I don't want to get into the science of it. I know that it's something along the lines of fossil fuels have received government subsidies for a long time, and this would probably be some way of balancing the field. It would have been nice to see Fox News refute that statement, or at least discuss it. But I believe the episode of The Five, which talked about Climate Night, actually aired before Climate Night had happened. So that's kind of like asking a film critic to debate a plot point in a movie they haven't even seen yet. Tucker Carlson then compares fossil fuel companies having to pay a fine to slavery. He says that if you order somebody to do something, they're your slave. I don't know if that's how he feels about the military, or law enforcement, or any employer issuing an order or directive to their employee. This is why I can't take Tucker Carlson seriously. But then I guess nobody should, according to his lawyer. Jesse Waters says that people used to be moved by telethons and things that would show pictures of starving children. I guess he didn't know that the Climate Night hosts were going to show their own pictures of climate disasters and weather emergencies and dropping birth rates, and that they would be calling for immediate action also. I don't know why he doesn't think people would be just as moved by that. I mean, if people are moved by one set of pictures, it's possible they might be moved by another. Jesse Waters also said he believed that Late Night was once influential, when Johnny Carson was reaching 9 million viewers a night. But when Carson was king, television was not nearly as fractured as it is now, which is precisely why Botto wanted to bring together multiple hosts on the same night so that he could make up the numbers in the aggregate. Although Gutfeld got the highest rating for the night, if you add up all the hosts that participated in Climate Night, you'll see that they reached almost as many viewers as Johnny Carson would have. So Gutfeld can claim a victory for having the highest rating of the night. But if he really considers himself to be the only conservative late night talk show host in a sea of liberal media, it might be a little premature to claim victory. If there were more conservative hosts on TV at the same time as Gutfeld, the question is, would they take more market share away from the liberal hosts, or would they just steal audience members from Gutfeld himself? But I always try to remember what Newton Minow, chairman of the FCC, said back in 1961, that a rating point only tells you how many people watched what you chose to give them. It doesn't tell you how many more might have watched if you had given them something else. After tuning into all these late night shows for the first time in ages, I would have to agree that they're not all that funny. And maybe it's just Climate Night. Maybe it's just that these comedians didn't pick this topic. They were asked to do it. And maybe they just didn't quite have the right approach to climate jokes. I don't know. I wasn't expecting to see Bill Gates as a climate activist. That shows you how much I watch the news. I mostly know him as a great capitalist, right? A CEO of a tech company. It was nice to see Dr. Jane Goodall still plugging away after all these years. I would have liked to see a little more from the Andy Cohen team. I know they were a last-minute addition to the Climate Night event. I couldn't even find their clips of the show on YouTube because they weren't labeled Climate Night. He had the Real Housewives of some city on his show. I know he's a producer on the Real Housewives, and so all the clips I found online were labeled as Real Housewives. He may have had a whole segment earlier in the show with his Climate Night guest, but it's not on YouTube. I was lucky to find a clip from the Real Housewives where at the very end, the climate lady who was like standing off in the corner, he just says, "Do you have anything else to say before we go?" And so she just said one or two more things. But also when she said shop package free, I thought that was just sort of a generic, good advice about reducing plastic usage. But then I see that she's the CEO of a company called Package Free. So really she was just plugging her company. So I would have liked to see a little bit more effort from Andy Cohen. So this was an interesting experiment, but I hope the next time the Late Night Saga crosses paths with the current news cycle, it's for something a little bit more fun.